Now, the Cape Town High Court has approved over 24 billion rand in settlement on the Steinhoff case. This happened yesterday. The ruling allows the multinational company to put more than 2 years of legal wrangling, which involved 184 billion rand in claims, to rest. The Steinhoff crash is estimated to have eroded more than 200 billion rand off the JSE and wiped off pension funds of millions of people due to grave governance breaches at Steinhoff. It had a devastating effect on a lot of South African and international investments. Rob Rose is the editor of the Financial Mail. He joins us now to talk more about this. Rob, good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Great, good to be here.
Give us your reaction to the verdict and what is your view on the amount given as a settlement in relation to what has actually been lost?
Well, Leanne, I mean, the fact is that, you invest in stock on a stock exchange and you know it's a risky investment. So you invest in this thing and then in 2017, it turned out that 106 billion rand was fraudulent, just didn't exist. So then the share price collapsed and people lost money. And that's how markets and capitalism is structured to some extent. So, in many of these big collapses like this, the companies go bust, nobody gets anything. That was the story with Enron, WorldCom. We've had it in this country too with things like Masterbond, African Bank in 2014 collapsed. There have been other collapses, nobody gets anything. So this is actually quite a positive thing for the shareholders, the pension funds who lost something, to have got at least something out of this. It's quite a positive thing. Yeah. Sure, they didn't get back all the money, but on the other hand, that money was based on a lie to some extent and had vanished since it was, stock market money. So I think this is actually quite a positive thing that allows Steinhoff to potentially stay alive in the longer term.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to see the positives in this, because this 24 billion rand is a final approval from a 184 billion rand in claims. What happened in between, and why is it binding on all claimants against Steinhoff?
Steinhoff is trying to see if it can keep going. I mean, that's not assured at this stage. So what it did quite a while ago is it said to anyone who had a claim against it for the money lost or whatever, come to us with your legal claims. We'll have a look at how much money we have, see what we can settle, and we'll divvy up what money we have and settle what we can. So that at least we know where we stand in terms of legal claims. If they're trying to keep this company going, they can't afford to have new legal claims drifting in every 10 minutes. So that was their approach to it. So it asked for anyone who had a claim to bring their claim, and then it offered a percentage. I mean, this is about 20% or less in some cases. Yeah. A lot of people were obviously very unhappy. They felt they should get more of this divided pot, and it took a lot of wrangling. Various people, Christo Wiese, the former chairman of the company, who in his version lost 59 billion rand when Steinhoff collapsed of his investment. And some of the pension funds, guys like Alan Gray and Coronation, who'd invested in Steinhoff on behalf of pension funds belonging to South Africans like you and I, they also claimed money from this and have got something back, which is perhaps more than they expected.
Yeah, I imagine it is. I mean, I'm having a look at pretty much so what the share. I mean, it's 585 basically the payout per share. I mean, this doesn't obviously come close to covering the highs of 90 rand it was at. I mean, that's the reality. So 5.85 versus 90 rand at the time. It's a very, very small portion. But like you say, it is something. But Steinhoff faced more than 100 legal claims, totaling about 130 billion rand from shareholders who maintained that they were duped into buying a worthless stock through misleading information. How do you envisage this settlement will be distributed now?
So the way I see it happening is that people will have lodged their claims and they will get paid out fairly quickly. The issue is now whether Steinhoff as a company can still survive from this. I mean, they've still got 10 billion euros in debt that they have to pay. What happened prior to the collapse is obviously it brought a whole lot of companies across the world, based on this, scrambling to fill up its coffers. And it turns out that, the revenue, the profits it told shareholders and the public existed just weren't true. So you've got a much smaller company in essence, much smaller profits that are being used to pay this massive debt. So Steinhoff, its survival is certainly no guarantee. So the guys running it at the moment are trying to reach a situation where they can still salvage something and keep it going. And I suppose that's the longer term picture. Can Steinhoff still keep going? It has some good investments still. PEP is a fantastic company. It pumps out cash. It's a good investment. But yeah, I mean, I suppose it depends on, will we see Steinhoff around in 3 years' time? That's not certain.
Yeah, it's quite incredible. I mean, when people look at the household names that fall under Steinhoff, these are things that you don't even, you don't really realize, do you? I mean, this is just something that you've become a part and parcel in our lives. And these are a lot of employees in this industry. A lot of people work there. A lot of people go there. And I mean, this is something that we need to keep in the back of our mind, because a lot of people are angry and saying, well, why? Who cares if Steinhoff actually lasts? But the reality is that more people go down if they don't actually manage to continue.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think that, nobody knew quite who Steinhoff was. I mean, it was a name that could be anything. It's actually the name of its German founder. But the fact is, the companies that fell under it, like you say, there was Incredible Connection, there was Ackermans, there was Pep. In France, there was a Conforama chain. There were, a lot of Poundland in the UK. There were big names that household names that fell under this thing. So when those companies fall into financial problems and have to repay debt, the whole company has to repay debt, jobs get lost. So that's why it's important for everyone that I suppose Steinhoff is able to deal with this and get this wrapped up.
Yeah.
Closing down stores, they owned Joshua Door, for example, and a lot of retailers. So you don't want, at a particular stage where we have 46% unemployment, if you look at the widest definition, you don't want more people out on the streets if that can be avoided.
So we look at the date. I mean, just after the ruling yesterday, Steinhoff has said in an announcement that the settlement effective date is expected to occur around the 15th of February. I know you did say that it was going to be quite quick, but the key question here is, where's the money going to come from? When they're in so much debt already, where is it going to come from?
They've actually recovered quite a lot of money from various people. Deloitte, the auditors, who signed off those financials, which in the end turned out to be, not quite worth the paper it was written on. Deloitte has paid them a quite large sum. They've recovered quite a lot of money from various places, and they've sold various assets. They've sold a percentage of and bundled a percentage of PEP and various other things. So they've sold a few things. They've recovered money from people they could. And the Deloitte settlement was a significant thing. So I think they have now got this pot, and it was from that pot that they were dividing up and paying the litigants out of this. I mean, they're still, like you mentioned, they have to pay this debt, but that will obviously come from what money they make at the stores. It's quite a delicate balancing act. I think they still have to manage.
There's so much more I want to ask you, but I mean, I need to ask this all-important question: where is Markus Jooste? I mean, we know that we know he was charged with fraud in Germany, but where is this man?
Yeah, well, he hasn't been charged with fraud or anything in South Africa yet. Last we heard, he was somewhere between Stellenbosch and Hermanus, and it's become quite a famous, quite a fun activity. Spotting Markus, people report that they saw him here and they saw him here, but one place they haven't seen him is in court or behind bars, and I think that's a frustration that a lot of people have. 4 years later, there hasn't been any action on this. It's not like Markus Jooste is fighting a court case at all. He's not fighting the Hawks. He's basically at home. And I think in terms of accountability for what happens in our corporate sector, I think that's a big problem.
Yeah, it's a huge problem, and one that it just doesn't sit well at all when you look at this. I mean, Rob, you wrote a book on this. I mean, it was a Steinheist. I know that you sort of went in there. I mean, this story it's in the UK, it's in Germany, it's in the Netherlands. There are documents that haven't even seen daylight yet, and you've got a guy who's sitting with all of this and is still living the life. But I mean, what don't we know about this yet? I mean, I know it's a tough question, but do we not know a lot about this case still?
I do think we know quite a lot about it now. There were forensic auditors that spent the better part of 18 months trawling through Steinhoff and finding out what happened. And it was these guys who discovered that effectively the amounts that they told the public they'd made was overstated by 106 billion rand over a decade of dodgy transactions that had gone into this thing. So we know those kind of things. We don't know the specifics of that, and that's one of the reasons why my magazine, the Financial Mail, and Amar Bongani have gone to court to get the full forensic report from Steinhoff of what happened. I mean, I do think it's important that the public knows exactly what happened in this case and see where accountability lies. We haven't seen any charge sheet against Markus Jooste or the executives. We haven't seen the mechanics of how this happened. So we have, tiny little abbreviated forensic report, and we have what the journalists and the public has been able to piece together. But we still, like many of the cases involving corruption in our society, we're still piecing it together bit by bit.
Rob, thanks. Thanks again. Rob Rose, editor of Financial Mail and author of Steinheist, giving us that what went down in history in the major story of corporate greed, plunder and corruption in a grand scale.